Hello everyone, welcome to Crafty Soup. My name is Misty. Normally you would see my hands working on a crafty project, but my energy has been focused out here this past week, so I have not brought you any crafty videos for at least a week, maybe longer. Because I don't want to leave you hanging, I decided that I would give you a garden tour of where some of my other crafty energy goes when I'm not making paper projects. So I do love to garden, and I will say now, pardon the noise because I do live near a freeway and you'll probably hear some of that, and a helicopter just went overhead. So the beauty of being outside. And also I am in my grubbies today because I will be working my butt off out here yet again. Now, the springtime is a time of massive weed pulling. I'm also rearranging a whole bunch of things in my garden, both to try and combat the weeds long term, but also to make the garden a little more practical, because I haven't done any veggie garden in a long time. I was working on flowers and I'm so ready to get back to the veggie garden. So that is in the works, and I'll just take you on a tour and show you what I've got. I tend to ramble sometimes, so if you've got the time, grab a cuppa and enjoy my garden tour. I'll start you off back here. We actually have 2/3 of an acre right in the suburbs, but we've got that deal because we're right next to a freeway. This property used to be a much bigger piece of property that over time has been broken down into smaller chunks, and because our neighborhood used to be on septic systems, the property wasn't able to be split down any farther due to codes. So that's how come we have a nice chunk of property, and it's what we could afford when we really wanted to move out to the country. Another story altogether, but I'm kind of glad we didn't end up in the country. At any rate, this is the back of the property, which is next to the freeway. We do have a bit of a berm, but you will hear freeway noise. And this area used to be covered in ivy and periwinkle, which are both invasive in this area. I live in the Pacific Northwest, by the way, so it rains here a lot. We have a lot of cloudy days, which is today. This past week has been pretty sunny, and so I've been very happy to work in the garden. At any rate, this area back here is becoming my native garden because I really try to garden in what I call a lowercase organic way. And that phrase was given to me by a friend who said the uppercase O for organic is all about the purity of the organic method, and mine is more about trying to keep nature in mind and trying to use as few chemicals as possible and to use as many natural methods as possible to help support the wildlife in my area. Because I am in the suburbs, not many neighborhoods have trees like this. So I love this piece of property because we feel like we're in the country if you can ignore the freeway. I call it the rushing river. But the bad thing about this piece of property is that berm is covered in blackberries, and way back there, let's see if I can zoom, way back there along that fence line, you can see that there are a mass of blackberries. In fact, that whole space that you see, it is now grass that needs mowed. Used to be blackberries, but I'm slowly getting it under control, and this is one of the things that keeps me very busy in the spring. And you can see I haven't done that yet because I've been working on other things. So back to, let me zoom back out, back to this native garden. Because I am in Washington State in the Pacific Northwest, we have a lot of the natives here. So we've got stuff like Oregon grape, and over there, all these little pots are my temporary name tags for things because I'm still learning. I'm still learning native gardening techniques. This is all new. I just put this stuff in the fall. And you can see I have very mild outlines of pathways planted around, or set up around here with lots of branches from all of those trees that fall down. But I've got other things back here. I can't tell you I know the names of everything at this point. That actually is some native bleeding heart. I don't quite remember what that one is. We've got some ferns. We've got more pathways that go off that way to a neighbor and our old chicken coop. Lots and lots of ivy that I have to keep away from the yard, so I trim the fence line often, or have started trimming the fence line often. See, this one is a snowberry, which has no berries at this point, but it has white berries normally, and it spreads pretty happily around here, so I'm hoping this will fill in a lot. I haven't actually been back this way much lately. I've got some more native bleeding hearts. So you can see those flowers are much more delicate than the varieties you'll find at the garden center. I did plant a rose back here. Oh, and it is growing. I haven't checked on it lately. It's hard to tell on the camera between the weeds. But here is another branch that fell out of a tree this winter that I will have to remove from this garden path. So we won't trek through the jungle back there. And you can see I have a pile of branches from winter issues and also from removing invasive stuff back here that we'll need to haul off to the recycling mulching center. So that is the way back, and this will be a much bigger native garden as I work on it more. So let's head to another area. Here I am kind of smack in the middle of the property. This is our gravel driveway that goes from the road. And that is the side lot, and it goes around back to where we were just at, back there in the native garden. All of this section has been chickens for, 14 years probably. That's an older chicken coop that actually needs to come down at this point. But this is the pathway to the current chicken coop. They are on lockdown right now because there is an avian flu virus going around that is very deadly to chickens. So they are on lockdown so that they don't pick up the virus from wild birds. And then this is stuff that's all under construction, and it is the lower priority. All the way in the front of the yard used to be my old garden beds, but because the water is here, and the garden beds were way over there behind those trees, it wasn't working. So I gave up on veggie gardening for a while. And that really is, because of all the trees, that really is the best sunny spot in the property. But water was an issue. So now the chickens just continue to mow and take care of the weeds for me up there. So let's go ahead and move into the backyard. This has been in progress for, we've been in this house since 2003, and I've done multiple things over the years, but this backyard section really has all been this way for the last 4 or 5 years. So I use a lot of logs and branches from my trees because we just have a lot of it. We have so many trees that I hate throwing out this natural material, having to haul it off places. And it's free. It's free garden bed edging. So I use that instead of bricks or other stonework kind of stuff. This back here is a bit of a shade garden. I've got a mixture of natives. I've got some kinnick, sword ferns, other native ferns, but I've also got some flowers in here. This one right here is cyclamen, and I love this plant. If you have a chance, go look up cyclamen because the flowers are gorgeous, and it blooms twice a year around here, in the spring and again in the fall. It doesn't like drier, hotter temperatures, so it really is a cool weather friend. And then you can see more garden beds. I am redoing some of these with natives. I've got, this is called osoberry. It will be a smallish size tree, which is going to replace this tree here, which is holly, and it is very invasive. And I've loved the holly. The birds love the holly, but it is so invasive. And I have mounds of holly all over the yard. And the thing about holly is you can cut it down, but it keeps growing back over and over and over again. So this is a terrible plant. Let's see, I've got lots of lovely bed fillers over here. This one is a native huckleberry, and so it is finally happy. This one's probably been here for about 10 years. It's finally getting happy because I added a drip irrigation system a couple years ago and during the pandemic. So a lot of this stuff has been because of the pandemic. I've been able to focus out here a lot. And then just some other bed fillers. I love hosta. Hosta is so rugged and durable and forgiving. I had some hosta bulbs in a pot for probably 2 years and never watered them, never did anything, and they kept coming back. So hostas are lovely. Some lovely columbines. These are not native columbines, but I do have some of those going on. And some more newer stuff. These are peonies that I moved from the area that will now be the veggie garden because it was flowers before. So they actually moved quite well. I was very pleased with that because I've heard they can be picky. So I did it right. Here is a wire fencing that I use to help support dahlias because they can get pretty leggy. And I just planted some brand new dahlia bulbs that I got from a friend back here. So that's fun. And then this section of the garden is pathways. You can kind of see all along the edge of the grass. These are all pathways I put in about 4 years ago because this whole backyard used to be pretty much dirt, and it would grow weedy grass but never really a lawn. And I've tried and tried, and we finally put in a patio because it was just so muddy back here that we put in a patio 4 or 5 years ago, and then I'm building up these flower beds. So these are one of my current favorite flowers, which is ranunculus. And I just learned about ranunculus a few years ago, and I've been missing out all of this time because these things are gorgeous. So if you've never grown ranunculus, it's pretty easy. It's a very tiny bulb, and you can plant them super close together because really that is kind of the bulk of the plant. So you want to pack them in there. This is a red flowering currant native around here. I did tell you I was going to ramble, so hopefully you've got that cuppa. Just a whole bunch of things back here that help support hummingbirds because that's one of my favorite birds. So this is a salvia. And it's actually called hot lips, and the colors of the flowers change color depending on the temperature. So they range from white to pinkish to hot red to a combination of those colors. And so I love this plant. The hummingbirds love this plant, and it is very hardy. So I recommend that as well. And then I've got a few things over here. I can't remember what those are called. I always want to call them rock roses, but I don't think that's it. I do have these things written down in a garden journal, but not always in my head. I've got a lovely clematis. I'm working on some seeds for my veggie garden. And then just a lot of things over here that help support hummingbirds and make me happy. This is a Weigelia, which is just a hybrid version of Weigelia. And we had a snow event in April, which doesn't happen around here. It's like we've been here 20 years and I have never seen it snow in April. So it was wild. And this one did not appreciate that. So I need to come in and do some heavy pruning because it was not happy. I have got some delphinium here, which is getting ready to bloom. And that one is just gorgeous, makes me happy. I do have some weeds in here, but a lot of this is poppies or other small flowers. These things, it's hard to distinguish them. See, the weeds have come in here just in the last few days since I've weeded. These guys have sprung up. This section is called, it's got a few names, Gara, whirling butterflies. I think there's a couple of other names, but it gets taller than me with these spires of delicate flowers on them. But this one can be a little bit troublesome because it reseeds super easily. So a lot of these bits down here are babies, and I have to remove those because they get huge. And they don't transplant well because they have a deep taproot. So I've just got to come through and weed all of those out. So the good news is that they do when you pull them out, they do die off pretty easily. And then I've got a rose bush, and let's see, I think that one is aster, and this one is a spirea, but it also had a little bit of hard time with the snow, and the weight of the snow just kind of weakened all the branches, so I need to come through and prune there. And speaking of pruning, this is supposed to be a pathway, but the rose bush and the spirea have eaten up the pathway. This is a strawberry bed. This used to be my little veggie patch for the last couple of years, but it gets quite a bit of shade here because there is a big hedge and then bigger trees that way. So this section gets a lot of shade. So the strawberries, besides the slugs, the strawberries do okay here. I'm hoping the artichokes will do good here because they don't like, it can get super hot back here, and they don't like that direct hot in the summertime, and they get wilty. So I'm hoping this will give them some afternoon shade and they'll do a little bit better. I'm going to take a pause here to get a drink and talk to my daughter, and I will be back in a moment. Okay, I'm back. I took care of what my daughter needed, and we can continue picking up the tour from here. So we talked about the strawberries and the artichokes. Down in there is a rhubarb. It's been moved around the yard several times as I try to find the right spot for it, but I think that will be its permanent home. And then back along the fence, this fence is new because the neighbors did some construction projects back there. I moved, these are raspberries, which are an ever-bearing variety, so I get fruit in the spring and then again in the fall. But these have all been moved from the previous raspberry patch, which we'll get to later. So I don't know that we'll get much out of them this year. And then back here, this is our garage building. And back there is a terrible mess, and you can see the weeds there that go back to that zone of blackberries I was talking about earlier. And I am currently going to be working on this zone today, as well as more of the veggie garden. So this used to be random flowers, blueberry bushes, the artichokes were way back there. So this was just kind of mishmash of stuff that never really had any focus to it. Although I do have some grapevines back here. Unfortunately, we don't like the grapes. These grapes are what's called slip skin, which when I bought the vines, I had no idea what that meant. I didn't even know that was a thing. And that means that, like the word says, the skins slip off the grape as you chew them. And the texture to us is really unpleasant. So yeah, those have not been good. I'm going to move them probably over to the fencing around the chickens, and that way the chickens can eat the fruit. Free food for chickens. I can also harvest them and give them away to people in the neighborhood. So that's the grapes. I did buy a new crunchy green grape that's non-slip skin that will replace this one anyway, and that one may stay just because it's beautiful, or I may move it like I mentioned. But I've got one little sad blueberry. I don't even know if you can see it for all the weeds. Sad, there it is, sad little blueberry here because this section has not been well tended. It just hasn't done well at all. So I'm on it. I'm on this section. In fact, this is the new veggie garden for this year. I've got a pot with peas because if I try to plant seeds straight in the ground, the squirrels just dig them up. And any tiny seedlings, the squirrels just dig them up. So I have to do transplants or put seeds into pots because otherwise it's futile. So these are, this is actually a blueberry I got from Costco, and then flanking this pathway, there's another blueberry from Costco. So I'm hoping those will be good. This actually is a lilac, which I'm going to keep pruned pretty small. I just want a small focal height in the garden over here. And I don't want it to shade the blackberries, or sorry, the raspberries too much, because the reason I moved them back here is because their original patch is way shady right now. And then I'm trying to keep the strawberries away from the slugs because we don't get very many berries over here because of the slugs. So that's a challenge. I have no good solutions for that. Anyway, today I'm going to be sheet mulching this whole walkway here, and I'm going to create a couple of, probably 3 of this size veggie beds. These are going to be temporary. This whole section will probably get raised beds built. I have built several raised beds in the past out of various woods, and they last for about 5 years, and then they rot, and then it is a pain. So any new raised beds I'm going to do are going to be out of metal. So this is waiting till we can afford and have the time to do that. So I will be sheet mulching all of this to keep the weeds under control, to create some zones for veggies for this year. And as you can see, we have a few things. These were the 2 things I planted in the fall last year that the squirrels and slugs did not eat. I had planted a whole bunch of stuff in here for a fall garden. And yeah, that's what left. These are 2 broccoli plants. So anyway, I am moving a bunch of these random flowers. I will have to wait until the fall to move those, so I will garden around them in the meantime. But amongst the weeds, I have these actual, some kind of fescue ornamental grass, and I really like them. They are great space fillers. They help control the weeds, although as you can see with this grass here, they don't control all the weeds, but I'm going to move these to the front yard to help control the weeds up there, but we'll get to that. And then just, again, just stuff that needs done, and that's why I've been out here all week. There's a lavender there. This whole section was covered in lavender, and again, I'm moving all the lavender to the front for weed control, and I'll tell you more about that when we get there. In the meantime, this is going to be potatoes, but because this grass right here is called quack grass, and it is terrible. The roots of quack grass, oh, I do see one right here. This is the roots of quack grass, and what happens is they have basically needles on the ends of their roots, and they burrow themselves through anything they find, including potatoes. So I have not grown potatoes on my property in years and years because the last batch I had, all of the potatoes were full of these quack grass roots. So what I'm doing is I am digging down at least a foot and pulling out as many of the roots as I possibly can. I'm sure that I cannot get 100% of them, but I'm trying. I've edged it with some root barrier, and then this will be a potato bed, and this pile of dirt still needs sorted through to get all of those roots out. And while this is potatoes this year, this whole process hopefully is a much longer term weed control process that I hope will get rid of this quack grass, because it is a pain. At any rate, there's some other stuff over here that I will need to deal with and move. This is some kind of volunteer, probably a weed. Anything that I like that has volunteered is usually an invasive weed. I think it's called rocket, but I don't quite remember. I'd have to look it up again. I've got lots of more irises over here, which will get moved to that zone, but we'll get to that in a minute. I've got a star jasmine there, which will climb this pole, and then eventually, if we can see this, it will span this wire that we have running all the way to the house. And these are patio lights that we bought from Costco a couple years ago, and they are gorgeous. I think they've been super popular at Costco, so if you like them, I'd go check out there. Because we love them, and I know a lot of people do too. And then back here is a mess of stuff prepping for veggies. I did move some of the lavender over here because that stuff is going away. That is a variety of euphorbia, which takes over everything. And we'll talk more about that later. I try to create little riverbed style areas, and this one is full of leaves that are turning into compost right now, so I need to work on that, and that's what this bag of rocks is for. This area of this bed was started a few years ago, and that's as far as I got. So all of this stuff has been in here either since last summer, or most of it got moved earlier this year, like back in February. So I've got various forms of carnation. I call them carnation, but the proper term is dianthus, and pinks, and there's other names for these varieties, but I just call them all carnations. So that is my favorite flower, among others, but I really like these for cut flowers in the house, so that's why I have those. And then the poppies are another nice weed control variety. They're beautiful. They can be weeds themselves, but if they're native and they're beautiful and they pull up easily if you want to get rid of them, I don't consider them weeds. I have another lilac here, which will replace this tree, which was an old apple tree that was always, the apples were just always bad. They had maggots, they had scab. They would fall on the patio and we'd step on squishy apples. So, and then the weather broke part of it, so the apple's just gone. And that brings us back to where we started with the backyard video. But I didn't show you a couple of little pathways that go in between that holly and around the apple snag now, which snags are very good for wildlife. Speaking of wildlife, I didn't show you my bird goodies. So I've got a suet feeder here, which I love to watch the birds on the suet feeder. And in fact, that suet block right there is not their favorite, and it holds two, and on this side it's empty because they've eaten all of their favorite already. So I need to refill that. I do have a birdhouse here, and then you probably can't see it, but way back on the pathway to the chickens, I do have another birdhouse over there, and that one gets used every year. So far, the one over there hasn't been used. I have a seed feeder for the seed-eating songbirds, and that is my kitchen window, and right next to my kitchen window is a brand new hummingbird feeder. I used to have one that was a different style, and it would get full of ants and became a huge problem. So my family got that for me for Easter, actually. And so that is a beautiful new addition. And I can see all of these bird feeders out that window, which is my kitchen window. That is my swing. That is my favorite place to sit when it's not raining. However, it gets totally soggy when it is raining. So I should put that cushion away because it's supposed to rain today. And it did rain last night, so that is a problem. All right, so that's the backyard. Let's go ahead and head to the front yard. All right, here we are in front of the house. This is the original driveway from the house, but when we moved in, we started using the gravel driveway to the garage in the back because it just made more sense for us. So here is my mulch pile. Remember I talked about sheet mulching, so that is layers of, or it's called lasagna mulching or something like that also. It's just layers, cardboard mulch, it can be layers. So right now I'm just doing a single layer of cardboard and a nice thick layer of mulch, and that I get from an organization called Chip Drop. And I'll put a link in the show description in case you're interested, but the organization organizes tree services, and instead of the service having to pay to dispose of this mulch, you can order it to be dropped off in your yard for free, but you have to know that you will get a lot. This whole driveway from here all the way to there was full of mulch, and it's been this way since last fall because it's taken us a while to work on it. So that is the method of weed control I'm using, and I'm really trying to get all of the around the house garden beds. The rest of the property is another story, but all the stuff around the house that I can't mow easily is getting sheet mulched. Here is a ginormous rosemary bush that was one of the first things we planted when we moved in here, and this thing has been moved several times around the yard as we've had to do work and stuff. So that is my beautiful Mama Rosemary, and she has made babies for me that I've moved to other parts of the yard, I've given away. So I love her. And right now she kind of hides the garbage cans from the street view. Here is a garden bed that's been here for probably 6 years. As we did some work on the house, we created this garden bed. That is a blueberry that is finally starting to do okay. There were 2 other blueberries here this spring that I moved to the other side of the property where I mentioned the vegetable garden used to be. So I moved those because they were not happy here. And so this is all becoming a variety of native sunny flowers as well as some annual flowers. I just planted a clematis, so that'll be, and it's a clematis that blooms twice a year. So that'll be super pretty. And then I have a little hedge right here that as soon, let's see, where is it? Right there. As soon as that shrub gets big enough, I'll probably have to move the clematis, but that's okay. It's doable. So around this section, this used to be all herbs, and it's mostly herbs at this point. I have a French lavender. This is Hebe, which it actually isn't doing very well. I need to look up and see what's wrong with it. But that's an evergreen shrubby thing. I've got a patio pot here that I just put some annuals in, and I recently, this used to be mint, but I have a love-hate relationship with mint, and if you know mint, you probably do too. So I ripped out the mint from this pot and put in some annuals, and I have another peony in there, so that will be a bright spot of color from now on. That is, let's see if I can get it closer. That is a pot of mint that I'm going to keep. Now, mint has been in this garden bed since we moved in, and it will probably be in this garden bed until we die, but I continue to pull it, trying to maintain the mint just to that section. We'll see. It probably won't work, but we'll see. And then I've got sage and some golden oregano. That one is, let me see, the words are going to leave my head. French sorrel. There we go. That one is French sorrel. It's a soury, lemony flavor plant that's used for a variety of cooking things, but soup, and my kids just have over the years have used it as various playthings that they can make recipes out of, and it was great when they were little. This is a flower bed that has been a work in progress for quite a while. The poppies are new from the last year, and the ranunculus also is new from this past fall planting. I've got a honeysuckle growing up this one, and then just some sedums and a few other things. That is lemon balm, and it is escaping this pot because it's a mint family, and I will now have lemon balm all over the yard forever and ever, but it smells so good and it's really pretty, so I try to keep it there. And then this is, let's see, giant walnut tree that shades the entire front of the house. And that is why, I'll take you this way. This is my raspberry patch, and because when we first moved in here, the walnut tree was not as big, this raspberry patch did okay, but as the tree has gotten bigger and the raspberries get more shade, it is becoming less productive. So that's why I moved the patch to the backyard, and then I'll just swing you around a little bit. Hopefully I don't make you dizzy. But that side of the yard over there was the veggie garden, which I mentioned, and it had raised beds for a long time. There was a greenhouse there that got blown down in a windstorm. But right now I'm going to revamp that section. We hope to build a sturdier greenhouse when time and money allows. And right now I'm putting in perennial fruits. So I've got the blueberries that I moved over there, and some more raspberries and some blackberries. Thornless, edible blackberries, not the invasive Himalayan blackberries. And then I do have a mini orchard over there, but my fruit tree skills are sorely lacking, and that section is not doing all that great. So it needs work. I'll just say that. It needs work. So this is my sheet mulching. This area under the walnut tree was a mass of things that were invading. I mentioned the euphorbia, that was entirely in here, and some other ground covers that I had purposefully planted here from a friend's yard. And it turns out it's an invasive species, and now I know. So I am being super careful about what I plant from now on and making sure I know its growth habits before I put it in my ground, because I'm tired of digging out bad things. So this has been a project since the summer with that mulch pile and the cardboard, and finding enough cardboard has been hard. I've driven all over town, hit people up, scrounged around, and finding that much cardboard is hard. So I broke down and bought a big roll of cardboard to do this, because the mulch is free. If I have to pay for the cardboard to get an entire bit of landscaping done, that's going to save me time and headaches, and so I'm going to do it. And so there's not much else going on over there. I've got a couple of plants under the rhododendron, which I'm slowly pruning into a tree shape. This used to be just a short hedge, and I'm creating a tree shape out of it. And then in front of this fence this is technically city property, because it's a right-of-way for the road to turn into sidewalk and wider lanes and things like that. Although I doubt that will happen anytime while we're living here. So I'm turning it into flowers, and if anything happens, then it happens. But this section right here, close to the mailbox, has been underway since the pandemic, because again, this was just a hard section of weeds. I had like one rose bush that was nice and big, but everything just weeds. So I'm working on this area. I've got lots of things going on. So everything in this area is new from this year or last fall. And here is the rest of that lavender I mentioned that I moved. And so hopefully it was already blooming, and so it's a little bit late in the season to be moving it. But I think lavender tends to be pretty sturdy, so I think it'll be okay. It's just going to look sad for a little while. So I think that'll be okay. But I've got all kinds of things in here. Definitely more poppies, roses, more of the hot lip salvia. These are cone flowers. So this is a variety of things. This part gets a goodish amount of sun, but as we move that way, it turns into shade from the walnut tree. But rosemary, that was one of the babies from the Big Mama rosemary plant, and she actually is making lots of babies too. We'll get to that. But these are the pathways I just put in yesterday. So this is all sheet mulched pathways that will keep the weeds down, and this will give me official places to walk so that I can get to the weeds in the garden beds. And actually, since working on that one at the start of the pandemic, I've kept it pretty under control with the weeds, because I sheet mulched that when I started it. So a lot of this stuff has been pretty under control. So I'm getting there. This is a hazelnut tree. These things can get ginormous, so I need to keep that under control. And I considered just pulling it out completely, but I'm going to try keeping it under control, and if all else fails, we can cut it down. Roses, but this pathway is making me so happy. It is so pretty. I just love the woodland feel, and that's part of the reason why we wanted to live in the country originally. But I'm making my own little piece of the country right here in the suburbs. That is a volunteer maple tree. I need to figure out how big that thing's going to get, and it probably will get too big and I will need to pull it out. But for now, I'm going to enjoy it while it's small. But this keeps going through here. We've got more rose bushes. The previous owners of this house, the lady was a rose gardener, and she had roses everywhere. But when we bought the house, we didn't know, because the house was a flip, and the guy who flipped the house cut everything down, just cut it down, and we did not know that the property was hiding all these roses. So we've kept a few of them, but she had so many roses that we just couldn't keep them all. And then moving this way, that is my current compost pile because the walnut tree makes a lot of compost with all of its leaves and things. So this is going to get moved behind these two new shrubbies, which will hide it a little bit better from the street. That one is a mock orange, which gets 10 feet tall, and I don't know how big around, probably up to the fence at least. And that will be a big shrubby, deciduous shrub, which loses its leaves in the winter. And that there is goat's beard, which becomes a very tall, feathery shrub, but it dies back completely in the winter because it's a true perennial. And this was a little grass that I had gotten, an ornamental grass, not little, it's actually supposed to get pretty tall, that I'd gotten from a friend, but it's not doing well because I think I waited too long to plant it. And that is the name of my gardening game, waiting too long to do anything. And then as you can see, I've got a few weeds to control, but part of the problem is this strip right next to the road just is a constant source of weeds coming in and coming in. So this is all going to get sheet mulched. Hopefully I have enough cardboard and mulch to do this, but the backyard is the priority right now, so I'm going to get that done first, and then I'll get to this. But let me show you some more weed control that I'm doing that's not mulching. This is also a little dahlia garden that I put in. Only a couple of them have come up so far, so I'm hoping the rest are just a little slower on the spring trend. But this section gets a little bit more sun as it peeks in because that's south, and the sun kind of peeks in under the walnut tree over here. So, and I'm going to prune some of these branches a little bit to help that get a little bit more sun. So that I'm going to put out signs that people walking by can feel free to cut flowers, because I think that's a great community thing. So that is a baby rosemary. That is a baby rosemary. That is a baby rosemary, and all of those came off of this rosemary, which, as you can see, is growing out to the edge of the road, and it's starting to control the weeds because it's shading them out. So my plan is to have all these rosemaries come through here and grow all the way out to the edge of the road and be my weed control for me. And you can see I get a few grasses right at the edge of the rosemary, but that I can easily come through and just pull. I don't have to backbreakingly hoe everything out. But you can see there's some weeds in here that I do need to come through and pull. So I think that might be the end of the garden tour. So I know I've said this, but I am really pleased with how this section came out, because I spent like 4 hours yesterday working on this, and it just makes me so happy. I love that woodland, the woodland stroll feel, and that's what I want most of the property to look like. So anyway, thank you so much for watching today, and I hope you enjoyed my garden tour. If you have any questions about things in my yard or questions about plants, not that I know the answers, but we can have a conversation about it and find resources and share resources. So that is the end of my garden tour. Thanks again, and I will hopefully be back with you next week with some crafty videos as per usual.